All right, I got to check out some Star Wars Outlaws early. Just a couple of bits of housekeeping before we begin with this preview. First and foremost, I think it's important to address up front, yes, I am a Star Wars fan. Yes, I do love Star Wars. My favorite game of all time is Knights of the Old Republic. My second favorite game of all time is Knights of the Old Republic 2. So yeah, I do love me some Star Wars. I just finished listening to the audiobook for Into the Dark. I still read Star Wars comics. I still engage pretty heavily in Star Wars media. I have yet to see Acolyte, but yeah, I enjoy Star Wars. And I feel like with the ongoing, many people call it the Disneyfication of Star Wars media, I understand some people are very put off by what they're doing with the brand, and I don't know if Star Wars Outlaws is really going to shake any of that up for you. That's really up to you and what you see of the game. But for me, as a big Star Wars fan, I may lean a bit more positively into this game, and I think you should just be aware of that up front. Number two, there are different types of previews in gaming. There's hands-on and hands-off. This is a hands-off preview. So Ubisoft invited me in to check out what was about 35 minutes of gameplay all throughout a presentation. This is similar to what I did for Pentiment in the past, where you sit down and you preview a game, but you don't exactly play it. Not my favorite form of preview. Of course, we also have to acknowledge up front that there's that weird pre-order situation with Star Wars Outlaws where they have egregiously high-priced items. No comments on that as of now. Otherwise, just pure deflection from Ubisoft. And last but not least, I saw the gameplay on June 3rd ahead of the Ubisoft Forward event, which is already taken place by the time this goes live, I think. But nonetheless, we're recording this about a week ahead of time. So let's get into what I saw with Star Wars Outlaws, outlining it at the top here. So first and foremost, this game takes place between episodes 5 and 6 after the Battle of Hoth. I saw 3 different quests called the Wreck, False Flag, and the Relic. The Wreck takes place in an ancient High Republic cruiser to find a nav computer. Now, the main question people ask whenever they hear anything High Republic related is, do I need to be super familiar with what's happening in the books and everything? But you're seeing a gradual transition from the books to big screen media with High Republic inclusion. There are some High Republic elements in Star Wars Jedi Survivor. The Acolyte really symbolizes the first major showing of High Republic content. The books have been doing this for, I think, 3 years now, but based on what I saw with Star Wars Outlaws and how they incorporated things here, I don't think you need to be an aficionado of all Star Wars lore in the High Republic era to understand what you're seeing in this mission here. For me, though, I thought this was really cool to see a downed cruiser and exploring this thing. I really find it fascinating what they're doing with the High Republic era, this kind of golden age of Star Wars right before everything completely collapsed, this encroaching darkness. So seeing any more of that always lights my fire. That was one mission. We'll talk about each of these in detail. Then there was False Flag, which is where you're going to fight some Imperial forces on a space station and pilot the Trailblazer to take on various TIE fighters. So you're going to see a little bit of space combat there. And then there was the Relic, where you infiltrate a Crimson Dawn Syndicate hideout and steal what is called a priceless relic. And you see some stealth gameplay on display. So let's get into it. What is the gameplay for this title? For me, the biggest question I had going in was about open world exploration. That's really what I was looking to see. Like, what's beyond the cities? What's beyond these areas where a lot of inhabitants gather? And how does landing on planets work? How does going to different star systems work? I got a little bit of a sneak peek at that. At the end of the mission called False Flag, you start to fly your ship around, and as you already saw in early gameplay of Star Wars Outlaws, it's very arcadey looking, very responsive turning where you can boost, thrust to the side, almost like a dodge roll. So it's very responsive in that way compared to something like Starfield. I would say it looks less weighty. And then you can look at planets and initiate what's called a landing, and you could pick from a list of locations. So what I saw here was Miragana City, Junta's Hope, Pike Poaching Station. You can go to any of these different spots on the planet, kind of similar to Starfield. Like, you look at the planet, you go through a list and go, I'm landing right there. Now, the difference with Starfield and Star Wars Outlaws is you can land literally anywhere in Starfield. In Star Wars Outlaws, you can land in specified locations. When they landed in Miragana City, you saw that it was dense, full of life, but it didn't seem highly interactable. Ubisoft typically has these types of open worlds where the life simulation is really good, in my opinion, whether it's Far Cry or especially Assassin's Creed. I feel like the sense of life is captured well. I felt that here in Star Wars Outlaws, but when it came to actually interacting with stuff, it looked like it was a bit of window shopping here, but we'll see in the final product. Because again, when they landed in Miragana City, I saw to the left, there was this area that looked pretty open and vast. So I was wondering, like, can you just go from the city out into the open world? How big are these open world zones? Because it's not just like one open world, but multiple. I unfortunately didn't get that answered, and that was the biggest bummer of the preview because I really wanted to see that sort of stuff on display. Still, there was a very seamless transition from space to ground. Kinda, you have this fog or the clouds, which is a loading screen, invisible though, and it keeps you in the experience, so I think it does something pretty good there. Now, while I didn't get a ton of information on exploration, I did learn about the core gameplay elements here, like how does your key blaster work? Can you pick up other weapons? The answer is yes, you can pick up other weapons, but your blaster has 3 types of modes. There's the basic plasma, which is used for damage. There's an ion shot you can use, which is to whittle away on shields or overcharged droids. I also saw this was used to open up doors and just kind of navigate the environment a little bit. In particular, when you overcharge a droid, it can actually explode and affect other enemies nearby. Speaking of which, a lot of the shoot 'em up areas in this game resulted in a lot of conveniently placed explosive barrels. I don't know if this is just for show, but I hope in the final game it's not like that. Because, look, I know the stormtroopers are supposed to be like cannon fodder, really clueless guys just throwing their lives away. I get all that, but like running near 40 different explosive barrels, like, number one, who put these things here? Why are they all here? Why are all the stormtroopers running near them? Maybe I'm being a bit nitpicky, but it just stuck out to me in like every firefight. There was just a bunch of explosive barrels lying around. I liked when things got into the gadgetry, which we'll talk about. Final mode for your blaster was stun. So you could use this to take out regular enemies in one hit. It's on a cooldown. I typically saw this used in something like, say, stealth gameplay. Like she would lean around a corner, stun someone. It made a loud noise though, so it typically I would hear audio of enemies being alerted. So it doesn't seem like there's a lot of hardcore stealth in this game. You can do like melee takedowns and quietly go around and pick people away, but most times guns will fight here in Star Wars Outlaws. You're not going to be crawling around in the grass or anything like that. Most things will result in a firefight, but you can at least whittle away the forces a little bit with some stealth gameplay. Another element of stealth gameplay beyond the stun shot and the takedowns from behind is Nyx, your companion. So Nyx is this little cute alien that follows you around, and he has a couple of little features that make the gameplay a lot better. For example, he can survey the area, or basically he's your scanner. Not exactly like, say, the eagle in the sky in Assassin's Creed. Like, we're not talking about something along those lines, but surveys the area, lists some interactable elements, and kind of lets you just map out how you want to tackle a certain situation. He can fetch items and weapons for you, so you can tell him to go grab something, and he'll get it for you. He can cause distractions, and then he can help you in combat. So he can jump on enemies' faces. This could be used just to distract enemies in general, or you could use it in stealth gameplay. So there was one time where Kay was sneaking up behind 2 different stormtroopers, and she choked one out while Nyx jumped on the face of another, and then she meleeed him. The melee, when it's like hand-to-hand combat, doesn't look particularly great in this game. But yeah, there are stealth elements. You can also pick up other blasters. Like I mentioned, one I saw on display was the E11. I didn't get to see any others. Sounds really great, by the way. I should add that in there because to me, half the experience with Star Wars is the soundscape. And that brings me a little bit to the music. The music in Star Wars Outlaws is, I don't know how to describe it other than it's a surprising departure from typical Star Wars music that we've heard before. Now, I'm not saying it's as good, but it reminds me a lot of KOTOR, where it marches to the beat of its own drum, but still fits and has the Star Wars feel. What I mean by that is that every time a firefight starts up, you're not hearing like you're not hearing that. It's, again, marching to the beat of its own drum, which I appreciate it. Like, I love the John Williams score more than anybody, but you know, hearing it in every single piece of media that I've heard from Star Wars for the last 20 years of my life, I'm ready to hear some new music like we got with KOTOR, where you have a new composer stepping in, bringing some new feels to the soundscape of Star Wars. And I think they did that here with Star Wars Outlaws. So I especially wanted to call that out, that it's very Star Wars, but it has its own feel to it, which is great. While you're navigating the environment, I saw 2 different types of mini games, if you will. One was hacking, and I have no idea how this works. I see a bunch of symbols on screen, and I watched this gameplay over multiple times. I was like, what is this mode? It does not show well. I have no idea how to get through it. And the other one that was equally confusing, but I think I figured out after a few viewings, is the data spike. This is the other way that you can get into certain buildings, get into certain containers. I noticed that you would have this sort of timing-based turning of a lock, and you would have to press your trigger at the right time on the location of said lock, and it would turn the gear the other way. I'm just guessing here, though. That's the problem with hands-off previews, is I don't know for sure, but it did not show well. I didn't look at it like, say, Skyrim lockpicking and go, I I get that. I'm hoping we're not stepping into what Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 did, where that lockpicking was a force to be reckoned with, that's for sure. But I noticed when Kay was doing a data spike, there were challenges popping up on the screen. I don't know if there's like a perk system here. They didn't show any sort of progression, but as you did certain things, there was another one where you had to make Nyx happy in different ways. So if you sent them out to distract an enemy, like that challenge would progress. So I imagine as you complete these, you're going to earn passive gameplay buffs by playing the game a little bit differently, and it's going to make it easier long term. There was also a grapple hook. This is part of what I would call contextual inputs for light 3D platforming a la Uncharted. So it's not grapple hook like complete dynamic gameplay. I'm going to throw it on this wall, climb up the side, see what happens. It's very Uncharted in when it's not doing the open world stuff, that you're going to be guided down this pathway, you're going to jump on these walls and, you know, throw your grappling hook out there in the times it's right, but it's not this free flow sort of mechanic that you can use whenever, but it is there. And the most 3D platforming I saw was in the High Republic Cruiser section of the game. I noticed that it was pretty intensive in there, and I noticed then that there was a different flow of gameplay for all three of these quests. One was more ship-based, one was more stealth-based, and one was like a mad dash out of the cruiser, including some firefights with some 3D platforming. So it looks like this has a good mixed bag of gameplay elements here, which should keep things pretty interesting. Otherwise, I wanted to just list off a bunch of random other things I noticed here. I had them here in my notes to the right here. I didn't know where else to put them, so I thought I'd just throw them out right now. For starters, upon escaping the Imperial Station, I noticed a wanted sign appearing in the middle of the screen, and you would actually interact with a satellite dish to clear said wanted status. I love this idea. I love the idea of GTA in space, that if I mess with these stormtroopers enough, they're going to come looking for me, and that there's a way to wipe the slate clean and call off the search. I thought this was a really cool element. Didn't get to see it fully on display other than it activating and them deactivating it. Like what happens when they notice you in a city? Will they notice you in a city? Is it just for that star system? How does all of that work? Again, didn't get the full details on that, but I like that it's even there in the first place because that's pretty unique to this game. I also noticed some other gadgets. I talked about those earlier. There's things like grenades, smoke grenades, electro binoculars. So there's some different gadgets here that you can use in combat. In particular, I saw a lot of usage with the smoke grenades, hiding K or confusing enemies and going in for a stealth takedown, or masking their vision and having Nyx go in and distract them and then taking them down from behind. Like there was a lot of usages for it, so it was cool to see gadgets there. I'm curious if there's any other grenade types that they will have in this game, and hopefully they do. Weapons do overheat in this game. There is no ammo count, and it comes with an active reload mechanic. So it's the same thing you've seen, for example, in Gears. Like you have this bar, and in the middle of this bar is a sweet spot, and anytime you reload in the right spot, it seems like you get a damage bonus, and Kay goes like, yes, nice. Like she gets hyped when you hit that active reload. But yeah, no ammo count, just overheating weapon. There were different outfits for different locations. So there was this one snowy place called Kajimi City, which had Kay all bundled up. I loved the aesthetic of this place. This very much snowed in city. It had me very excited again to see what the exploration in this game is like. Saw a lot of city spaces, saw a lot of life, but didn't get a look at things like the open world, such as when we had our first bit of gameplay on the speeder bike when Star Wars Outlaws was first shown off, and there was a complete open expanse there. So we'll see just how big things get here. I don't know how many planets there are, how many star systems there are as of this moment in time, but yeah, I mean, they have some real cool locales already, and none of them looked familiar, which was also a great sign. The cover in this game is very seamless in that there's no gluing yourself to one spot. Sticking with our Gears of War comparison, you know, you slam against the wall and you're kind of stuck there. Even previous games from Massive, who are the developers of this game, like The Division, had cover systems that would involve you sticking to it. But this is seamless in that you kind of crouch and hover behind it, and there was really good dodge rolling and going from area to area without having you being glued to one particular spot. Animation work in particular, when Kay was like leaning over the top and unleashing some shots from her blaster, looked very natural, like she was trying to stay in cover but aim and shoot at the same time. I thought that was really good. And there was even some sliding around, so that was pretty cool to see that level of mobility. Otherwise, Maddie, did you have any complaints in the brief snippet of gameplay you saw for Star Wars Outlaws? And the answer is, there's one thing I noticed that I think the internet's really going to sink its teeth into, and that would be the facial animations. Throughout the entire experience, these just looked lower quality in general, but in particular in the more in-game cutscenes of characters just having exchanges, but not the fully produced ones where it looked respectable there, but in the more in-game cutscenes, human, alien, doesn't matter. I think the internet's going to pick these apart because they did not look really good in my opinion. Voice acting, though, is still very good, so you don't have to worry about that. But overall, that's my major takeaway from a brief look at Star Wars Outlaws. How am I feeling afterwards? I still have some questions I want answered. Am I hyped to the high heavens? I wouldn't say so, but what I saw was very encouraging. I already was pretty sold on the game from the first look, because for all the Star Wars games we've got in the past, I know some people go, oh, open world fatigue. But as someone who, again, has played a ton of Star Wars games, like if you look here at my Xbox shelf, you can kind of see down here, oh, if I could point right, down here, all these are Star Wars games. So yeah, like I love Star Wars games a ton. I've always associated them with Xbox because I grew up with like KOTOR on Xbox, so I always pick them up on my Xbox. But yeah, you get things like Battlefront, you get things like KOTOR, you get things like Star Wars Obi-Wan, Jedi Knight, Jedi Academy. Like you get all these different experiences, and I guess the closest we got to open world was Jedi Survivor. But if there's anyone to make a Star Wars open world or galaxy type experience, I mean, look, I'm not going to complain that it's Ubisoft because they do pretty solid open worlds. I didn't see any familiar elements so far in the open worlds, so I didn't notice any towers that are marking a bunch of locations. We'll see when the time comes how that exploration is handled by Ubisoft, because again, I didn't see much open world stuff in general, but I am crossing my fingers that they let this be a more seamless adventure. If what I played of Avatar Frontiers of Pandora was anything to go by, Ubisoft seems to be walking away from that design philosophy a bit, which I'm happy about. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's my general takeaway for Star Wars Outlaws. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments down below. Fire away with any other questions you got. I know it's going to be a very busy week for me, but I'm looking forward to answering as many as I can once I settle down, because I know by the time this goes up, I'm going to have a lot of stuff that's going on, as you'll see, no doubt. So, ladies and gentlemen, take great care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next video. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.